Once upon a time, in a quiet little town, nestled between rolling hills and a wide, peaceful meadow, there lived a young girl named Cinderella. She had warm brown eyes that always seemed to find something beautiful to look at, even on the greyest of days. Her mother had passed away when she was very small, and her father had remarried not long after, a tall, serious woman with 2 daughters of her own. They were not cruel exactly, but they were cold, and they never quite made room for Cinderella in the way a family should. Her stepsisters had the largest bedrooms, the prettiest dresses, and most of their father's attention. Cinderella's days were filled with chores, sweeping the floors, tending the garden, washing the dishes until they shone. She didn't complain. There was something in her that simply couldn't hold on to bitterness for long. At night, when the house was still and everyone else was asleep, she would sit by the window in her small room and look out at the stars, and somehow that always made her feel better. She had friends in a way that most people didn't notice. The mice that lived in the walls had grown fond of her because she always left them small crumbs and never shooed them away. The birds that nested in the garden tree would come to her window in the mornings, and she would hum softly to them while she worked. The old family dog would follow her from room to room, resting his grey muzzle on her feet whenever she sat down to rest. In the quiet corners of that busy house, Cinderella had built herself a gentle little world. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the door sealed with the royal crest. The king was holding a grand ball at the palace, a celebration for the whole kingdom, open to all young women of the land. Cinderella's stepsisters immediately rushed upstairs, pulling dresses from their wardrobes and arguing about ribbons. Her stepmother read the invitation twice, then set it on the table without a word to Cinderella. Cinderella picked up the letter after everyone had gone upstairs. She read it slowly, her fingers tracing the golden letters. A ball. She had never been to a ball. She set the letter back down gently and returned to sweeping the kitchen floor, but a quiet wish had already settled somewhere in her chest, soft and small like a bird's egg. The evening of the ball arrived. Cinderella helped her stepsisters into their gowns, fixed their hair, and fastened the tiny buttons on their gloves. They swept out the door in a cloud of perfume without looking back. The carriage wheels crunched on the gravel and then faded into the quiet night. Cinderella stood in the doorway for a moment, then closed it softly and sat down on the garden step. The night was warm. Stars were beginning to appear one by one, and the meadow beyond the garden wall smelled of summer grass. She wasn't crying, exactly, but there was a heaviness in her chest she couldn't quite name. She rested her chin in her hands and looked up at the sky. "You wish for something tonight," said a gentle voice nearby. Cinderella turned, startled. Standing in the garden, near the old pumpkin vine that had grown wild all summer, was a small round woman with silver hair and the kindest eyes Cinderella had ever seen. She seemed to glow faintly, the way moonlight glows through thin clouds. "I didn't say anything," Cinderella said quietly. "You didn't have to," the woman said, smiling. "I'm your fairy godmother, and I've been watching you for quite some time. You have been patient, and you have been kind, and tonight, I think, it is your turn." Cinderella looked at her for a long moment. Then, very carefully, she smiled too. What happened next was the kind of thing that is almost too beautiful to describe in plain words. Her fairy godmother moved through the garden like warm light, and slowly, gently, everything began to change. The fat orange pumpkin on the vine grew and curved and glowed until it became a carriage, its sides smooth as polished wood, lit from within with a soft golden light. The garden mice Cinderella had always been kind to scurried forward eagerly and were transformed into fine horses, their coats pale silver in the moonlight, their eyes eyes bright and calm. The old dog stretched and shook himself and stood up, tall as a proud coachman, his uniform perfectly pressed. And Cinderella herself, she looked down and found she was wearing a gown the color of pale moonlight, so soft it seemed to be made of mist and starlight. On her feet were 2 small slippers made entirely of glass, perfectly clear, catching the light like frozen dewdrops. She touched the skirt of the gown gently, almost afraid it might dissolve. "You look exactly as you always should have," her fairy godmother said warmly. "I don't know what to say," Cinderella whispered. "Then don't say anything, just go. But come home before midnight. By then, the magic will have run its course. The carriage, the horses, the gown, all of it fades at the last stroke of 12. Cinderella nodded, stepped up into the carriage, and looked back once at her fairy godmother, who was already beginning to fade gently into the moonlit garden. Then the horses stepped forward, and the carriage moved smoothly down the lane, and the night opened up before her like something from a dream. The palace was lit from within by hundreds of candles, and music drifted out through every window and door. When Cinderella stepped inside, the room seemed to pause for just a moment, not because anything dramatic happened, but because there was something in the way she carried herself, quiet and calm and entirely herself, that caught people's attention without her trying. The prince noticed her almost immediately. He was standing near the far end of the room, looking slightly tired of the evening, the way people sometimes do at grand events. And then he saw her, and he stopped looking tired altogether. He crossed the room and asked if she would like to dance, and she said yes, and they danced together so naturally, it felt as though they had always known each other. They talked as they danced and then continued talking when the music changed. He asked her questions and listened carefully to the answers. She asked him questions too and laughed at something he said, and it was a real laugh, easy and warm. She didn't tell him her name. She wasn't sure why. There was something sweet about just being here, just this, without any of the usual things attached. The hours passed the way hours do when you are truly happy, too quickly and all at once. She was in the middle of a sentence when she heard it, the first deep stroke of the midnight bell. Her heart jumped. She looked up at the clock, then at the prince, and without quite explaining herself, she slipped away, moving quickly through the crowd, through a side door, down the marble steps toward the courtyard where the silver horses were waiting. She was almost running. Behind her, she heard the prince calling, but she couldn't stop. She could already feel the air around her beginning to change. She made it to the carriage just as the last bell struck. In a breath, everything shifted back. The carriage became a pumpkin rolling to a stop in the lane. The horses scurried off into the hedgerow. The coachman was the old dog again, panting happily beside her. Her gown was gone. She was back in her simple dress, standing in the moonlit road, catching her breath. She looked down at her feet, and there it was, one small glass slipper, still on her left foot, glittering in the dark, as though it had not gotten the message about midnight at all. She had lost the other one on the palace steps in her hurry. In the days that followed, word spread through the kingdom that the prince was searching for the young woman from the ball. He had her other glass slipper, the one left behind on the marble steps, and he was going from house to house, asking every young woman to try it on. When the knock finally came at Cinderella's door, her stepsisters went first, as they always did. The slipper didn't fit either of them. Then the prince's attendant looked around the room, and Cinderella stepped quietly forward. She sat down and held out her foot. The glass slipper slid on perfectly, as though it had been made for no one else, which of course it had. Then she reached into her apron pocket and drew out the other slipper and put it on as well. and looked up. The prince was looking at her the way he had looked at her on the palace steps, and she returned his gaze calmly with that same steady warmth she had always carried. In time, things changed for Cinderella, gently, without fuss. She moved to the palace and the prince, and a life that finally had room for her in all the ways that mattered. She never forgot the small room with the window, or the mice who'd been her friends, or the birds at the garden tree each morning. She carried all of it with her, the way you carry the things that made you who you are. And every night, wherever she was, she still liked to look up at the stars before she slept. Some habits, the good ones, you never need to let go of. And now, like Cinderella, it is time for you to rest. Let your eyes grow heavy, let the day gently fall away. Somewhere above you, stars are quietly doing their work, and you, just like her, are exactly where you are meant to be. Good night.